I want to bring in my guests. We are joined with the man himself, KJ. No, KJ, how are you doing this morning? You doing okay, man?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Oh, thank you for joining me. KJ No, he's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. Once contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator. It is now available at iacenter.org. I'm sorry, KJ, I started something entered my mind at the last minute and it just threw me off. Thank you for joining me this morning, man. I am so glad. I always enjoy these conversations. Um, you sent me a link, and it's called, let's see, Witch Hunt.
Hmm.
Effectively, the way that the Trump administration is going after the Chinese and American universities. Um, well, obviously, it's going to create a brain drain, if nothing else. And by the way, one last point on this before I get your take. I saw this woman. She said, in the old days, it was it was in vogue to be Chinese and be more Western and go to American universities and get an American job. And she says, thank God I didn't do that. She says, that is not the point of view today in China. She said, it is a very different mindset, a very different point of view. They look at themselves as being in vogue with a certain amount of confidence. And the Russians would say the same thing, by the way, that there's been a confidence that's been attributed to them being able to win that war. And these callbacks to the Great Patriotic War, when China's an economic sense, and it's a like a science sense. It's a sense of their society growing and evolving in a way that is not necessarily true in the West. Am I getting that right? Or do you agree, disagree with that, by the way?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And it's a general trend, not just in China, but around the world. Before, if you were growing up in the global south, this was the great dream. You work hard, you study, you achieve academically, you go and study in the West. And some people would settle and other people would, have careers, and then they would come back and be valorized. And I think that is pretty much out of the picture these days. If you go to the United States and you come back to China, having an American degree doesn't confer any special prestige, doesn't confer any special benefits. It simply means that usually it means that you were not good enough inside of the Chinese academic system
Yeah.
to get ahead, because the Chinese academic system is very meritocratic. It's very, very competitive. And also, some of the best research now is being done in China. So the fact that you went abroad doesn't necessarily confer any prestige or advantage. And Chinese are realizing this now. And then also, they go to the West and they realize, what a failed state, what a complete, immiserated, failed state it is. And they often, before they go to the US, for example, they're very pro-US. And then when they, leave the US, they say, I've been sold a bill of goods, and they're, thoroughly disenchanted. So I think
Yeah.
that is a general trend, not just in China, but around the world.
Well, you point out researching why Chinese is dangerous, and that these two researchers in University of Michigan were taken as agro, basically that they were smuggling as agro terrorists. Am I getting that right?
Yes, they were not charged with agro-terrorism, but
Okay.
that was the framing of the statement of the Department of Justice. They were charged with smuggling and conspiracy and making false statements, etc. But essentially, what happened was that there was a researcher. Her name is Yunqing Jian, and she was arrested, and she's currently being held without bail and potentially facing 20 years in prison for smuggling this common fungus called Fusarium graminearum. Graminearum. Okay. Now she's a researcher in this on this fungus, and this is a fungus that causes food blight. And she's one of the key researchers who's doing research in the United States to prevent damage from this fungus. But because she, had a sample sent from China to her or tried to get a sample from China into the United States, the US is claiming that is alluding that this was an act of agro-terrorism, and that she was trying to affect the food security of the United States. Now, this is about as rational as saying that, as charging you, Jamal, you go to a gym and they charge you with bringing in athlete's foot, right? I mean, the place is crawling with athlete's foot. The notion that you brought athlete's foot into the place is absurd. And it's the same thing with Fusarium graminearum. It's prevalent everywhere in the United States. This is why Jian is doing research trying to prevent it. And most people think that it actually originated in North America. So this notion that she was smuggling something dangerous into the United States in order to undermine the United States is an absolute absurdity. Like I said, it's like, charging somebody with bringing E. coli into Chuck E. Cheese, right? I mean, there's E. coli everywhere in Chuck E. Cheese. That's just how it works. So it's an absurd charge, but it is also very, very deadly and dangerous, because what it signals is that there is once again this incredible escalation of persecution against Chinese, and in particular Chinese researchers. It means that they're all, suspects, spies, potential agents of the Chinese Communist Party, and that we have to go after them. So this is really, if there's any terrorism, it's really a kind of political or academic terrorism against these researchers to scare the bejesus out of them and everybody else. And, like I said, I cannot emphasize enough that she was actually trying to prevent a blight from this food crop fungus in her own research. She's trying to help the U.S. And so this is how she gets treated. The other person is Chen Shuanghan. She faces, again, 20 years for sending roundworms and plasmids on filter paper without proper permits. So why didn't they use proper? Yeah, I mean, people say, well, why didn't they do it properly? Why didn't they go through all the proper channels? But the thing is, these are minor process errors. People do these kinds of things all the time. Graminarium is not on any list of potential, bio agents. It's not. It's not on those lists. It's simply a process violation. She didn't file the paperwork because she was possibly trying to cut corners. But what most people don't understand is almost everything you do in the United States is a potential crime. From the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, you have probably committed between 2 and 3 felonies if they decided to, apply everything on the book at you. So you just can't get away from it. I was stopped going through customs once because I had a box of chocolates, and they said that I needed to declare the box of chocolates because they were agricultural products. And that's technically true. I mean, if you take those peanuts that you got on the plane and you put them in your luggage and you walk through customs, you've broken the law, because those peanuts are agricultural products and you actually need to declare them. But who does that, right? I mean, nobody. So this is how it works, So it is a witch hunt against these Chinese researchers. And the message it sends is that all Chinese are targets. And the larger message that it's sending is that the Chinese are dangerous and they're dirty and they're, deceitful. And this is why we are escalating to war against them. It's part of the hybrid war against China, the information war that is the subkinetic justification for the war that is coming.
Yeah, it's denigration of a group. I mean, the whole China virus thing fits within this context. I don't think they get, though, that they are creating a brain drain in the United States where less and less, I could be wrong, but some of the top universities in AI, mechanics, science, etc., are Chinese, and some of the top people are Chinese. And whereas you have this kind of open country where people can come in and do research and everything else, that is no longer the way we are regarded around the globe. We are creating a brain drain out of the United States into other countries where those countries or people in those countries effectively stay where they are. That is to our detriment. That is to our detriment. I mean, the reason why we call, Lady Liberty, bring us your poor, tired, huddled masses and all of this other stuff. That's because we wanted that potential of intellect and everything else. And that is not where we are today. I agree with you, KJ.
Yeah, so this is something that the US doesn't seem to realize or seems to have forgotten. This is being done, this is happening at the University of Michigan.
Mhm.
And I reached out to several of their faculty members. Nobody responded to me. There's a petition done by Code Pink in support of these researchers asking for the University of Michigan to step up and defend their researchers, who haven't, they haven't committed major crimes. These are just minor process errors. And there's a petition that Code Pink has put out asking for the university to do the right thing. But if you look at the university statement, they're saying, well, we want to make sure that we comply with the law, and we are going to make sure that all of our staff are properly trained on that. So not a one word of defense of of their researchers. Now this is a fundamental error because um, the US used to be a scientific powerhouse.
Yes.
Is no longer. Okay. That title has actually gone to China. If you look at the top 20 academic institutions for research, 16 of them are Chinese. If you go onto the ASPE website, ASPE is a China Hawk think tank which tracks many things, but they also track technological and scientific, rankings. And they say China is the cutting edge in 57 out of 63 cutting edge scientific and technological, uh, you know, uh, uh, uh,
Pursuits.
pursuits fields. And so China is way ahead at this point. U.S. has a few remaining areas of strength, but it really doesn't anymore. And you can see this coming because what the United States has done over the years, but certainly in the last half a century, is that it has not only deindustrialized the country, but it's also de-skilled its workforce. When I say de-skilled, it has essentially destroyed the system of higher education or education in general that would allow people to think critically, to think rationally, to learn important and critical fields of knowledge. All of that has been cut out. And essentially, we have, as I said, I don't want to harp on it, we have a country which is led by lawyers, who are essentially people who tell stories to themselves. That's what the theory of the case is. It's like, it's storytelling. It's like building a narrative. So you have people who know nothing about science and math leading the country, along with some businessmen, mostly unsuccessful businessmen, failed businessmen who are also leading the country. And on the other hand, you have the global south, like Iran and China, where the country really focuses on science, on having a scientific leadership, of having a scientific approach to leadership. And that is creating this fundamental gap. And it's important for the United States to understand that the scientific accomplishments of the United States were were largely driven by immigrants. In the 1940s, the US got a whole bunch of Nazi scientists, Operation Paperclip. In the 50s, they got a whole bunch of Hungarians. They call these the Martians, people like John von Neumann, who invented, the modern computer. And then you had waves of Asians, including, hundreds of thousands of Chinese. Go to any engineering department, look at who you see. I mean, it's mostly Asians. If you look at the math Olympiads, it's like US says, well, we recently did well in the math Olympiads. Look at who the faces are. They're all Chinese, right? So the US has kind of extracted the intellectual, just as the US extracts the labor and the value from the global south, it also extracts the cognitive labor and the cognitive laborers from the global south. And it's lived high off the hog because it's done this continual extraction or brain drain. And now it's completely reversing that because it doesn't realize, it thinks that, it's born on third base and it thinks that it hit a triple, right? It doesn't understand that these are, millions of people from around the world, millions of scientific workers, researchers, engineers who have actually pushed the US to this, pinnacle of, technological, achievement. And now all of that is reversing. There's a reverse brain drain. The Chinese are no longer staying here. And when you have situations like what happened to Jian and what happened to Han, people see that and they say, U.S. is not safe. I mean, we know it's physically not safe, but scientists tend to be idealistic. They tend to believe that, we do good science for everybody. We add and contribute to the global knowledge commons. This is a benefit for humanity. And we just do that and we'll be okay. And they're completely misguided. They are targets as well.
Yeah, the political space doesn't care about that, only in so much as you can use whatever they come up with as a weapon or science. Like, it's astonishing. That was the US's strong suit, believe it or not. Like, this idea of, yeah, we would take all of these people who are foreigners and coming into this country and they can contribute. And yeah, you're going to get some people who don't contribute, but it's like anything else. There are going to be noise in their signal, and we want the signal. And the signal is a benefit to the entirety of the country. They turned that on its head with, because it's not just these two women. That Chinese woman in Canada that they picked up,
Meng Wanzhou. Meng
yeah,
Wanzhou, yes.
yeah, the people in, I forget the other universities where they deported. Like, this stuff is outrageous. Like, and you look at other countries who say, okay, I don't think that's safe. I don't think it's safe. I look at Europe and think the same thing, by the way. When Europe evicted those people out because they were covering Russian topics, or the way that they are trying to shut down the information space it's like, okay, Europe doesn't seem safe to me for what I do for a living. That's not a benefit to your society. So, KJ, agree. One last point before I let you go.
Jamal,
No,
Europe has been swept with violence and irrationality for centuries upon centuries. And one of the, worst, forms of irrationality were the witch hunts. And, what we're seeing right now is an academic witch hunt, and it's a redux of the older McCarthyite Red Scare witch hunt. But even that kind of irrationality comes from the older European witch hunts. The European witch hunts were horrific. They lasted over 400 years. Somebody would have something bad. They would accuse one woman. They would torture her. Usually it was a poor working class woman who would be tortured until she confessed. And not only did she have to confess, but she had to point and accuse other people. And so then you would get entire communities who would be condemned. So cities in Germany like Bamberg or Würzburg, they would execute. And when I say execute, I mean burn at the stake, 900, 1,000 people because of these witch hunts. And very, very often, the starting point of this witch hunt was crop failure. For example, in Bamberg and Würzburg in the mid 1600s, the grapes died on the vine and the corn was damaged, etc. And this was actually caused by a minor climate shift. That there was like a minor ice age that was happening in Europe at that time. and so that
Yeah.
would cause early premature, crop failure, and crops would freeze, etc. And when this happened, then they would look for a woman, a poor working class woman, accuse her of consorting with the devil and having, Black Sabbath and using witchcraft to damage the crops. She would confess, and then she would point fingers, and then it would just expand from there. But note two things. One is the sheer and utter irrationality around this, which really, really plagues Western culture, for millennia, and certainly for centuries during this period. But also the second piece of it is the starting point, which was crop failure. And if you look at the allegations against Jian, they've literally made, allegations that she's trying to destroy crops. And so
Mhm.
this is a very, very deliberately crafted piece of propaganda, and it has the potential to, really, it's a powerful piece of propaganda. So it's
Yeah.
it's very, very dangerous. So the result of this is, the US is creating a reverse brain drain, but they don't realize that. The Trump administration, the Biden administration, they don't understand that because they are not scientists, don't do science. They believe they create their own reality, and they don't understand that they're actually constrained by the laws of physics and chemistry, etc. So they don't
Yeah.
believe. So that's problem A, because they're just, lawyers. And then the second piece of it is that as you create this foundational brain drain, you accelerate the processes both of disintegration and decoupling, but also, you're pushing uh, the West into the Dark Ages. During the height of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, uh, Russian or Soviet researchers and American researchers collaborated. For example, the polio vaccine was developed together. But we're at this point in time where the relations are even worse than the relations between, the Soviet Union and the U.S. at its nadir, and so that gives
Mhm.
you a sense of how polarized and dangerous this moment is. And of course, the ultimate, plan is to blow everything up, is to go to war. That's the destination. That's what we're facing, and these are just preliminary shots over the bow.
Yeah, but you would want. Um, we weren't always that way though. Like this country, like the notion that we were bringing Nazis, Werner von Braun, in order to build our rockets. That's bringing in a literal Nazi because it's an advantage to you because you recognize science technology as being one of the main primary fields of advancement of society. I don't know what the hell these people are doing. Like it's such a degeneration, like from where the U.S. was with all of its flaws and everything else. This is such a degeneration. Like these sociopaths who have taken over are not the brightest people. I agree with you. They're lawyers. So reality is malleable, despite the fact that reality is not malleable in real terms. This is what we get. We'll see. It's like we'll see how that turns out. We'll see how that turns out. I do not think it's going to turn out well. And
Jamal,
what I mean by that, over time, by the way. But give me a take, KJ.
yeah, I mean, this is what happens under monopoly capital. Okay, let's say you and I play the game of Monopoly. Eventually,
Mhm.
somebody wins, right? And
Right.
they get monopoly. This is how monopoly capitalism works. In fact, monopoly was designed to teach people about the dangers of capitalism, but people took it the other way. Notice when you play monopoly, somebody gets to have a monopoly eventually. That's how the game ends. Second piece is there's this constant issuing of money to the players, right? And this is
Right.
like the way the Fed has to print money. You pass go, you get $200. This is how it works. But eventually, even with that cash stimulus, one party gains the monopoly. Now, what happens under monopoly conditions is, as we've said before, you get deindustrialization because you have the people who are working, they're so immiserated, they cannot buy the products that the corporation is making. So on the one hand, and this is where the term oversupply really comes from. It nothing to do with China, because China doesn't function that way. But you have a monopoly corporation, it's building products that cannot be absorbed because there's no demand for it, because the workers who are working for the monopoly are so immiserated that they cannot buy what the corporation is selling. And so, under those circumstances, what do? You move into financialization. This is why, as I've said before, when you go onto DoorDash, if you can't afford your burrito, you can pay for it in 4 easy installments, right? That $20 burrito, too much, can't afford it, pay for it over time. You can pay for it in installments. Same thing with Apple, same thing with GM. GM made more money at one point selling loans than it did selling cars. It was for a moment there, it was a financial company
Yeah.
with a car manufacturing department, right? So everything gets financialized, and financialization means that you're simply making a claim to other people's money. It's simply money claiming money. It's dead capital controlling living capital. It's money that has control over people's labor, future labor. And so when you have that deindustrialization, you get the financialization. But the other thing that happens when you deindustrialize is you get de-skilling. People are no longer trained or taught how to do skilled work, whether it be cognitive work or manual, industrial skill laboring. They're not taught these things. So, for example, in California, the electrical grid is going to go down because we don't have enough linemen to do it. You have to train an entire generation of linemen to maintain the lines. There are not enough young people going into the trades learning how to become linemen, and all the older guys are retiring. And this is skilled work. Anything involving industry or infrastructure is very skilled work. It all takes training, but if you don't do that training, then people lose that capacity. A society loses that capacity. Now, the other piece that's added to this is that in the 1960s, the universities were hotbeds of rebellion, and one could say almost revolution in the 1960s. What was the response to that? Well, there are documents that lay out a plan to discipline the university. But one of the plans was make university so expensive, so burdensome, so shackling that no one will even think of rebelling inside the university or after the university. And so then you see these massive large um, loans that you have to take out.
Yeah.
You have to take out massive debt in order to get what in most countries would be considered just a normal education. You have to take out massive debt. If you take out massive debt, what does that do to you? First, it constricts or restricts the kind of disciplines that you can go into, right? You want to go into something that offers rapid remuneration, because if you go into a field where you can just think and just explore, etc., you are going to be in deep doo-doo when you graduate. You are not going to be viable. So it either directs people into very, very restricted fields, or it makes those fields only available for people of means who already belong to the ruling class.
Yes.
Right. So then, once having done that, when you're in university, you are highly constrained. And then when you leave university, you're even more constrained because you have to hit the ground running, start paying off those debts right away, as fast as you can. You better start working. Don't even think about trying to change society. The best you can do is, maybe get a nonprofit job and go into the nonprofit industrial system, which is still more of the same. You're still yoked, you're still controlled, you're still managed. And so this is a way of managing and controlling society so that you don't have these massive upheavals like you saw in the 60s. A university is a site of resistance and contestation. Traditionally, it's been that way for thousands, well, at least 1,000 years. And by clipping out, the critical capacity of a university to reflect and challenge a society and possibly improve it, you've created a situation where you're essentially, you've cut out your society's capacity for critical thinking and critical engagement, and uh, you've burdened all of its potential energized and deep thinking and idealistic youth with the burden of immediately becoming drones for capital. And under those situations, you are not going to have a good society. Everything can only go downhill from there. One of the key markers of a failing society is the breakdown in its educational system. Once education is gone, everything else follows from that. And we're just seeing, we're in the mid phase of this. So the university has been destroyed. It's been the neoliberal university destroyed academic education itself, and it's been overrun with administrators who are essentially rent-seeking parasites inside the system. And in the meantime, they try and they've been staunching that with constantly getting cognitive laborers from this global south, and now they've decided to cut that off as well.
KJ, thank you for this, KJ. You always have my appreciation. You're always a great speaker and explainer of the stuff, and my audience loves you to death. I love you to death. Thank you for this. I'm going to put this link, by the way, to your video that's discussing this below the video,
Right.
just so the audience can see it for themselves. It's a big deal, man. I mean, like it's an obvious downhill that they don't seem to either acknowledge or, for that matter, want. So I'm going to KJ know. He's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. He's contributed to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It is available at iacenter.org. You can find KJ on Breakthrough News Network on the China Report. And like I said, I'm going to put it at the bottom of this video when I cut this video. KJ, man, you always have my appreciation. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Jamal.
Absolutely. Be safe. All right, let's bring in my next